All right, Leif, next one. Leif, first off, thanks for picking up the spear. I'm interested to hear more about the Mujahideen in Ramadi. How did they stack up against U.S. forces? Was it like an NFL team playing against a high school team, or did they have tactics, training, and discipline equal to our own?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the thanks, but it was an honor for me to carry the spear. And as we said, we'd go back there in a heartbeat, certainly. This is a great question. It's a great question. I think it really gets to the heart of what we talk about all the time is the greatest quality in a leader, and that is humility. And when you look at the Mujahideen, or the Muj, as we call them, right, the enemy fighters who control Ramadi, there were several thousand of them by U.S. intelligence reports, estimates who controlled 2/3 of the geographic area of the city when we first arrived in the spring of 2006 with Tasking and Bruiser, when Jocko and I were there. And, we were showing up. Our SEALs are some of the best shooters in the world. They're some of the best combat troops in the world. We have a highly screened group of guys who've been through all the SEAL training pipeline that's a year and a half long, probably at a minimum, and then we've worked together for almost a year as a SEAL platoon. We've got guys with extraordinary physical fitness. We go to these awesome shooting schools. We train together. We have the best budget and gear that all the giant special operations budget can buy. The best training and equipment, and so when we get over there, we're ready to go. And pound for pound, if you take, a SEAL operator from Charlie Platoon versus one of the Muj fighters that we're going up against, that SEAL operator can do hundreds of push-ups. He can do hundreds of pull-ups.
That's
run.
NFL versus grade school.
Exactly. And that, the Muj fighter, he has virtually no training. He probably can't do 10 push-ups. He has none of the gear and awesome gear that we have. And it's pound for pound. It's not even comparable. And yet, to think about this from the reality perspective, right? In Charlie Platoon, we had 16 SEALs, and 5 of those guys were brand new, straight out of training, never been to combat before, never deployed to Iraq. 5 of us, and we're going up against the enemy that has had 3 years at that time, 3 straight years of nonstop real world combat experience. And so the experience level is not even comparable. When we're going up against these guys, they know the city. And they're able to use our weaknesses against us, whereas we got to carry all the heavy weight and the body armor and the helmets, and we're not acclimatized to 115 or 120 degree high during the day in the heat of the summertime. They are. And they live there, and they don't have to carry water on them, and they don't have to carry body armor and helmets, and they can just throw a backpack with 7 RPG rockets and a rocket tube and roll out with their flip flops and knock off Adidas tracksuit, which is what they generally wore, or their belt fed Russian machine guns that they used. They weren't near as good as the ones we had, but they were deadly, and they could use them, and they could shoot. And so you could never, ever, ever take those guys for granted. And I think that's if they would always be looking to probe weaknesses, and they weren't there to fight us head to head. They would try to take advantage of our weaknesses. They were very good at analyzing the situation, looking at a weakness and taking advantage of that weakness and probing for them. And if you ever took them for granted, I mean, you were setting yourself. They might hit you hard anyway, and you might lose guys even if you were prepared. But if you weren't prepared and you started taking them for granted, you sort of get complacent and not respecting them as an enemy, then you were going to fail.
And they kind of, for lack of a better word, they cheat too. That's the thing, right?
For sure.
You guys have rules of engagement, like all this stuff, and they just straight up.
And what's, I would say, even more important than that is they don't have value for human life. They don't value their own lives. They're literally suicide bombers, and so they could lose 5. They want to die. Yeah, they want to achieve martyrdom in many cases, and so them dying is not a huge impact. And then obviously for Americans and American soldiers and our friends, it's epic and crushing loss of life every single time. And so that is the biggest difference, is that we have to, it's like he says, this is what he says it's his NFL versus high school team, right? Well, if the NFL should destroy that team, right? Completely destroy it. But if the high school team scores a single point, they kick a field goal, they get lucky and kick a field goal, that's a win, and that's crushing, and that's kind of what it's like. They're not going to win. They're not going to win the game, but even when they put a score on the board, man, it's crushing.
And one thing that, as I think about it too, that what was unique about that task unit bruiser deployment to Ramadi in 2006 was, I deployed 3 times to Iraq. Had quite a, Jocko made multiple deployments to Iraq. We had a handful of guys that have been there multiple times, the guys who went later to Afghanistan and elsewhere around the world and saw significant combat operations. But what was unique about that was we were going on foot, because you want to drive because you're going to get blown up with these horrific IEDs that are going to destroy your vehicles. So we park our vehicles. We had to carry everything on our backs and walk into deep into enemy territory in places where we knew that it was very unlikely that tanks could even get to us to help us out in some cases. And if they were going to try to come in, they might very well get blown up and killed. So what was interesting about that is, we might have 8 or 10 or SEALs. Sometimes it was 20 SEALs, but that's a fairly small group. We had some Iraqi soldiers with us, but we didn't count them when it came to. They didn't count when it came to, hey, who's going to actually be able to defend this position? But I had to have the expectation that we might very well have 50, 60 enemy fighters surrounding our position, attack us, and they could easily overrun us. And what was unique about that deployment was we didn't have dedicated air support. We didn't have a dedicated quick reaction force that was going to come out and help us, that only was supporting us, unlike some other SEAL combat operations that have happened elsewhere. And it was or on other deployments that I was on, and we were on our own. We had to plan for that, and you had to recognize that they would absolutely bring it, and they would try to kill you, overrun your position, and kill everybody, capture someone, and that was a real possibility that we had to recognize could happen at any time, and we had to be ready for it.
Well, just to state a statement of fact on top of what you're saying, the enemy did overrun friendly positions multiple times while we were there and kill dozens of people, and some of those heavily fortified ECPs would get completely attacked, overrun, vehicle-borne IED. So it wasn't like this could happen. This is actually happening. While we were there, friendly positions got overrun by the enemy, and so it was not just it could happen, but it is happening, and it could happen to us tonight, tomorrow night, whenever.
Yeah, they were good. They used cover and move. I mean, they laid down fire and supported each other. They put together plans. They had combined arms.
They had combined arms. They'd come in with the machine gun fire, and then the RPG fire and the mortar fire, and then all of a sudden there'd be a VBID. That's what they do.
And there were different levels within there as well. I mean, sometimes you get shot at and it was kind of a spray and pray, someone dumping an AK in your direction. And then other times you'd have multiple belt-fed machine guns hitting you that were, coming through a little, 3 by 4 foot window from 100 yards away, and they're coming inches over your head, and you're looking at each other like, man, these guys know what they're doing. So you could tell when the guys who've been there for a while, maybe come from elsewhere, they brought it, and you could never take that for granted.
And also, luckily for us, even though we might not have had a dedicated QRF, we had the best damn QRF in the world, which was
absolutely
the 1-1 AD, and they were awesome and never failed to come and save the asses of TU Bruiser.
They braved those roads over and over and over and over again, jumping in their tanks, taking such tremendous risk, or driving in Humvees down these horribly dangerous roads we didn't want to drive to come help us out, and they did that all the time. They were awesome, and we couldn't have done any of our operations without them.